Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Which way am I clicking it?
The normal way. That's forward, that's back.
Got it. Awesome. Oh, man, well, I got to be honest. I do not have a PhD like any of those guys. I got a high school degree. But thank you. I'm extremely honored to be here. I mean, those are three brilliant guys, and just having been asked, I feel extremely honored. So I just want to say thank you to Chris. Thank you for all the guys. Thank you for the RAs to put this together, because I know it's not easy to talk about this stuff, right? Like, there's so much shame in church culture, in Christian culture, where it's like, it's just uncomfortable, right? Because if you say that you're struggling with it, then if other people are struggling with it, sometimes they don't open up about it, right? So you want the honesty, you want the vulnerability there, and sometimes it's not always reciprocated. But today, I'm going to talk about identity, because identity is what's changed my life, right? Like, it is probably, like, I'm not the most theological guy, I'm not the most psychological guy, but I love philosophy, right? So if I can boil things down to some simplistic wisdom that I can use on a daily basis to help me get through, that's kind of what I like to do, and so that's what this presentation is all about. So my first question is, who are you, right? Who are you? Because little does culture know, little do we know that that question is going to dictate the decisions that you make in your life. When you say, I am, there's always something that's going to come after that, right? And whatever comes after the I am is going to manifest into actions. So let me ask you a question. Who's ever tried to quit pornography? Right? Who's ever tried to quit? Right? And you just failed miserably, right? Or maybe you've quit and it was like 2 days, and then you're like this dude, and you're just like veins popping out because you're just like horny as heck. You know what I mean? So now here's another question. Who's ever tried to quit and you've actually, and now this is not just pornography, but any addiction or any habit, you wanted to quit, and you're proud of yourself because you were able to quit, right? Maybe it was smoking, maybe it was procrastination, maybe it's you were being bitter in some area of your life and you just kind of got over it, right? You moved on with your life. Now, who's ever tried to quit something? You made it a month, you made it 3 months, you made it a year, and then some reason you just came back to it, right? And then you ended up doing the same old thing that you used to do. The revelation that God gave me was about 5 years ago, and I was living in Spain at the time, so I was taking a 3-month internship at this nonprofit in Spain, so I was on the outskirts of Madrid. And it was a horrible nonprofit, terribly run, so I had a lot of time to myself. I could just, it was bad. But so about every single night, I'd just go and I'd pray. So I was praying for about 2 to 3 hours every single night, and I'm a big pacer, so I go to my room and I literally just pace back and forth for hours, just praying. That's what I like to do. And so I had a lot of time, and during this period of my life, I was healing from some of the, I don't like using the word trauma because I think it's a little bit overused, but I was working through and healing through some past problems that I was going through. So a little bit about me. I had never experienced anxiety until I was 15, and then between the ages of 15 and 17, I tried to commit suicide twice. I lost 50 pounds, so I was 160 and I dropped to 110. I had to drop out of high school, and I had to be homeschooled because I was so weak, I actually couldn't walk. And so my mom every single week would have to carry me to the hospital. So talk about pain, talk about embarrassment, talk about identity issues. I get it, right? I totally get it. Throughout this entire time, I became heavily addicted to pornography. So between the ages of about 15 to 18, I was watching it every single day without stop. Usually only once, but sometimes it got to the point where it was twice a day, right? Like, I remember high school, I was at a party, and I'm making out with this girl, and I couldn't get an erection. Dead serious. When I was 18 years old. And that was one of the moments where I was like, God, what on earth is wrong with me, right? And then you relearn, your brain rewires itself, right? And I'm fully healthy now, but it took some time. And so throughout that period, I was 19, so it was about a year and a half after I had made the decision that I wanted to kind of quit porn. And I kind of wanted to really find out who I was and become the best version of me, the most truest me, right? The most Christ-like version of me. And so I was still dealing with some health issues. By this point, I was about 135, 140 pounds. So I was getting there, but I was still struggling with anxiety. I mean, like, the anxiety was relentless. I worked 7 jobs over the course of 5 months and had to quit every single one because I was having so many anxiety attacks. I could not handle, literally, I worked 1 day at Chick-fil-A, and the reason I quit is because I had a mental breakdown on the way home. Because I was trying to make the chicken and I couldn't even put it in the box, right? So I understand mental health. And I remember I called my grandma one time, and this was while I was in Spain, and I'm just telling her because she's extremely prophetic, right? And she'll pray for you for 12 hours a day. I mean, this woman's insane. So I remember telling her, I was like, hey, listen, I've got some things going on in my life. Can you just pray for me? And I didn't even tell her what it was because I didn't feel comfortable telling it to her. But I said, hey, listen, I got some stuff going on in my life. Can you pray for me, right? Because I knew she would, right? She's a woman of her word. And so that was the beginning of the summer. About 2 months had passed, and I have 2 weeks left in Spain, right? And I'm still struggling with anxiety. I'm still struggling with some of the things that are going on in my life. And I'll never forget, my grandmother calls me. And in my devotions earlier that morning, I came across Proverbs 23:7 of the King James Version that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And I just remember reading and being like, wow, like that's kind of like, I feel like Buddha would say, like, why is that in the Bible, right? It just feels like so like, you know, it's so like of the mind, right? And then I remember reading a book that was recommended by Tony Robbins. It's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I've probably read it about 100 times. It's only about 50 pages, so it's not that long. But it's a book that I read it that same day, and I was just like, oh my God, like there's power in your mind, right? There's power in the things that you believe about yourself, the thoughts that you choose to partake in. And I literally got done reading the last sentence, and I put the book down, and I see my grandmother's calling me. And so I pick it up, and she's sobbing on the phone. And I'm like, God, my grandpa's dead. Right? Like, that's literally what's going through my mind. I'm like, because why would my grandma randomly call me, right? And so she's crying, and about the longest 45 seconds of my life happened right there. And she says, Dylan, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You're not anxious. My grandmother had the audacity to tell me that I wasn't anxious after I tried to commit suicide twice because of how bad it was. She said, Dylan, you're not anxious and you're not sick. That's not who you are. And it was like this moment where the prayer for revelation just came and hit me like a ton of bricks. And you can't control the things that happen to you, right? You can't control them. And things that happen to you will cause you pain, right? So it's not about shying away from all the pain of life. But when you see persistent problems that are cyclical, that will not leave you, it's not because of the cause, it's because you have believed a thought, you've believed a pattern that is recycling itself, causing you to reproduce the same things physiologically. So what on earth does this have to do with pornography? I was 19. This was 2 months after I had just got back from Spain. And I was into this girl, and we were FaceTiming, and we were talking, and we've been talking for just a few weeks, like not too long. And at this point in my life, I was about watching porn maybe once a month, right? So that's pretty decent for most guys' standards, right? Once a month is like, okay. Every 4 weeks, I'm doing okay. And I remember I watched porn twice that day. I masturbated twice. And you ever like, and I'm sure some of us know what it's like, where you watch so much porn, you feel like a zombie, right? Like it's just, you feel like you have absolutely no soul. And I remember I'm literally watching porn, and this girl that I'm into, she FaceTimes me, and I'm like, God, I can't talk to her right now. So I end the call. I get done, watching porn. And just such emptiness was just, it was like eating me alive. And I just kind of had one of these like Drake moments where you're just like in your feels. You know what I mean? And you're like on the side of the bed and you're just like, and like we've all had it. And I remember walking to the bathroom and literally looking myself in the mirror. And I remember the conversation that I had with my grandmother. And I remember her saying, Dylan, that's not who you are. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, the porn that I just watched, that's not who I am. It's not who I am. It's not who I am. The strongest human behavior is the need to stay consistent with how we perceive ourselves. If you think that you're weak, you are. right? There's this metaphor of the elephant that's in the circus, and it's trained its entire life to be pinned down to this weight. And as a small elephant, it can't go anywhere, right? Because the weight of what's holding it down is greater than the weight of the elephant at the time. But then by the time that it grows to its full size, it has every ounce of power to easily walk away from that thing, but it doesn't. Because it's conditioned in its mind that it can't beat the thing that's holding it down. And so often, when it comes to porn, it becomes our escape for comfort, right? It's what, when we're afraid or we're encountering anxiety, I used to watch porn all the time just because it was the only thing I could find that was an escape. And I didn't want to do drugs, right? So it's like it fills enough dopamine, boom. Shut the laptop. Now I have another 3 hours before I get anxious again, right? That's the loop I was going through. It's because I believed that I couldn't be free. I wasn't worthy of freedom. I wasn't a free man. And the words of my grandmother changed my life because I recognized that the anxiety that I was going through, that the sickness that was in my body, yes, it happened for a moment, and it was real, and I didn't choose it. But I perpetuated it because I chose to believe that I wasn't enough. I chose to believe that I was sick. I chose to believe that I was a slave to sin. So here are the simple things. Just four main takeaways. It's super simple, right? It's super simple. Your mind is a garden. Your mind is a garden, man. And identity is a soil, right? So whatever you plant in soil, it's going to produce, right? So if you think you're an idiot, you're gonna start acting like an idiot, right? If you plant the seeds of identity of unworthiness, the manifestation of that belief will be sin. And there's no way around it. Right? That's why the beauty of the gospel is that he calls you to a new identity, not to a new action. Because action comes after you've received the new identity. Right? I don't serve people because it's my godly duty. I serve it because God has given me a new identity. Right? I don't have to prove myself anymore. Right? My service to humanity isn't about approval because I'm already approved. Right? There's a difference there. Right? When you choose to think thoughts, you're planting them within the soil of your mind, right? And it's identity. And then what you become, and this is all subconscious, by the way. You don't really have much choice except for the thoughts that you think, right? You are much more subconscious than you'd like to admit. You do things by habit a lot more than you admit. You find freedom when you discover the lies that you've been believing. And that's not an easy process, man. That is not an easy process. Because a lot of us, we believe lies and we think it's our personality, but it's not. It's lies that we've been believing since we were 4, since we were 5, since we were 6. And so over time, what happens is that we've believed a lie so long that we start doing the same things, and we're like, oh, I've always been doing this, right? That's why you go to a specific culture and people act all a certain ways because they're all believing a certain thing, right? So like I lived in Turkey for a little bit, and to be a Turk is to be a Muslim. Right? So it's like, oh, I'm a Muslim because I'm Turkish, right? I am from the East Coast. I'm a very blunt person because I'm from the East Coast, right? My identity, there's this identity of the seeds of East Coast have been planted within the soil of my being that when I interact with anything different, there's this incongruence that says, okay, that's not who I am, right? So identity is the temperature that you set in your household. So the only way to become free from pornography, because there are people here and you're struggling, right? And that's okay, right? Doesn't mean it's good, but it means it's okay and that you're going to be able to get through it, right? We put up events like this because we're praying for freedom. We're praying for healing. But the main thing, if I could say one thing, it's that your identity is far more powerful than you recognize. And that if you think you're a slave, if you think that you're struggling with porn, then you won't ever be free. Accountability is very important. Strategy is very important. Action is very important. But as long as you believe yourself to be unworthy and not lovable, you're not going to fight for the freedom that God's given you. And you'll forever believe that you're only worthy of artificial love, which is pornography. And so with that, I just want to say this last thing. Whenever you say I am, be very careful about what you say. Because you might think that you're explaining your personality, but in reality, you're explaining the truth of what you believe. And it's the truth of what you believe that's going to act out in a particular way. So my encouragement to you is not to see you the way that you see you, it's to see you the way that Christ sees you. And Christ sees you the same way that he sees himself, which is perfect, which is holy, which is righteous, which is pure. There's no sin, there's no taint, right? So whenever you get tempted again, just ask yourself, who am I? And does this fit with who I am?